Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now. I wrote the book Disrupt Your Now and do this show because I want y'all to understand that someday never comes. So I want you to start going for your dreams right now. And tonight we have Anshar Seraphim on here to talk about PR, public relations for your small business. Before we get started, I want to read just a bit about Anshar so that you will understand why he is the person to speak about PR. And then I'm going to let you talk, Anshar. So, Anshar's clients have appeared on ABC's Nightline. They've been interviewed by podcaster Tim Ferriss, written columns and editorials for publications like the Huffington Post, been featured in Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, and been the subject of multiple documentaries. So I'm going to turn it over to Anshar, but I'm also going to apologize for being late. I'm so sorry, y'all. I had technical issues. Anshar, welcome back to the show, and thank you so much for your patience.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And like I said, I worked in information technology for a decade and a half, so I know all about IT frustrations.
I'm just like, oh my God, I've been doing this show for 3 years and I've never had that happen. But I am so excited to have you back on, Shar, because when we talked a couple of weeks ago, we talked about personality and why it's so important to understand your own personality and also the personality of your prospects and your clients. So now that segues into public relations. And I want you to first, I want you to give people your background in case they haven't listened to the other episode. And then I want to talk about PR for entrepreneurs and small businesses, because I think so many people think that PR is like for big companies that have huge ad agencies and so forth.
Sure, sure. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I was about 75% nonverbal with autism, about age 11 or so, and I had a whole bunch of frustrations with social relationships and felt very isolated for the first couple of decades of my life. And so I basically made psychology and sociology and interpersonal dynamics, psychosocial dynamics, and um, even neuroscience and into an autistic special interest, really, because I was so hungry to connect with other people, and I got so just disenchanted with being in that isolation chamber of autism. I used to walk around with my arms crossed and never able to really look anyone in the face, and just kept to myself. And I was a shut-in, really, for a really long time, and I had to put a lot of things into place to change that. And I worked in information technology for a couple of decades, and I never in a million years thought I would have been doing something else with my life. But after I, ramped up all of those skills, I've been studying psychology and all of that related disciplines for about 17 years now, and it's changed my whole life. And eventually, I got to the point where I started teaching other people those skills for a living, which really startled me, But I think one of the cool things about teaching other people is it does two things for you. One, it gets rid of imposter syndrome, because
Yeah.
when you're able to relate skills to other people and then watch them flourish and succeed using those skills, it,
Mhm.
it's not something that you can take. Maybe the first couple of times you might, say that, they have dumb luck or something like that. But after you see a consistent ramping of success, then that gets rid of that. So that was really good. And then the second part of it is that the best way to learn is by teaching, because when you have to break down information and reconstitute it for the myriad of people that are out there and the different ways that they learn, you learn, so many different approaches and the questions that people ask you, and their hunger for information and being able to find their answers for them. That process also teaches you so much more. So that's been so instructive for me. Um, I have had the pleasure of teaching public relations as a discipline to recent graduates of like journalism and communication programs. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is that public relations is in and of itself both a psychological and a sociological discipline. You know, I'd mentioned during our last interview that a lot of people don't know who Edward Bernays is. Nephew of Sigmund Freud, and his approach, was trying to use, you know, the understanding of psychology and what happens when people form into large groups, and using that to change public perception. And obviously we've thrown a lot of Freud's theories out, or they've evolved since then. But the heart of the discipline of public relations is understanding the way that your product, your service, your personage, your brand comes across to your targeted demographics in whatever disparate areas you want to promote, and then understanding the different types of dynamics and platforms that you can use to be able to change that perception or modify that voice, or heighten things. And I think that sometimes people can get lost in the procedure of public relations, and they can forget the point. It is important that you identify who it is that you want to talk to. You have to have a really clear understanding of your demographics. Who is it that you're talking to and why? Because that dictates the message, first off. I've mentioned this a few times, but I think that people kind of forget about that 15% on either side of the spectrum of, like, IQ, for example, or education. Or I read a statistic not that long ago that said that up to 54% of people in the United States, adults, only read at a 6th grade level or lower. So, while that is a sad state as far as education, or where it is our focus needs to be as a society, if you're looking to reach those people, if they're hungry for personal development and understanding, or for your product, your good, your service, and they're part of that demographic, then that means that you have to take care with your language. You have to take care with the way that you come across, because sometimes a lot of those people are influenced by things that they don't necessarily involve in their personal identity or process, or for how they think they get to information. But there are a lot of elements that affect that in ways that they don't necessarily know, and you need to be an intelligent marketer. So I think talking about public relations first starts with the target. Who is it that we're talking to, and why? The why is always important. And then what is the existing impression of your brand, your service, your product, your personage? And this is where market research comes in. And this is really crucial and critical, because a lot of entrepreneurs can live in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
They surround themselves with people that are like them, and then they only get feedback from those people. But those aren't necessarily the people that they're looking to sell their product or their service to. So I would invite, and there's lots of these services out there that will do things like put a certain number of visitors from your targeted demographic to your webpage. Sometimes it's as little as 50 cents or $1. Sometimes it's more. And you can see the places that they go, the questions that they ask, what their impressions are. Some of them will let them do, video recordings. So having an understanding of where you are right now is really important. And knowing what the existing impression is, who it is that you're trying to serve, if there are any groups that you're looking to reach that aren't currently being reached, all of that is incorporated into your PR strategy. And whether you're using journalistic media, or you're using social media, or you're using you're using trends, social trends, or to have an understanding of how all those things work, it all starts with the target. So taking the time to do a proper assessment of how your good, your product, your service, your personage is received, and also what the common, social conceptions, misconceptions are about that service. Once you dial things down to a demographic, you'll get a good sense of what their hopes, their dreams, their fears are. If you're specific enough with that avatar, which is like a generic construction of like a random person from that specific demographic, and you do that for each target demographic, then you can start to connect with the things that are important to them and why. But their age, their interests, and the why also dictates where they spend a lot of their time online, or what kind of newspapers or periodicals or media they consume. What social media platforms are they on? I think there can be a tendency to want to use the platforms that we're most familiar with. But sometimes that's not where the avatars live for the people who are trying to reach with our products. So
Yeah.
that's the first step is who, and then why do they feel, think, and exist in the way that they do with deference to you. Because you have to have a solid understanding of that to have a public relations plan.
Yeah.
Now, once we move from there, then you have to ask yourself what the objective is. What do I need to change? And I'll go back to that proto example of Edward Bernays. In that early market, with smokers, smoking was really frowned upon with women. And he wanted to come up with a way to be able to change that. And the way that he went with an approach was that he attached himself to the feminism movement, and then he attached himself to the movie industry, and he basically created a cultural trend by understanding what was important to people of the time period that were being affected in that target demographic that he wasn't reaching. I think that when you're coming up with targeted demographics for your company, for your business, you have to think of who do you deal with the most. That's, of course, first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next is your ideal customer, your ideal client. Maybe you don't get a lot of them, but you want to make sure that your funnel, your marketing, your PR, everything is geared toward that person so that you don't miss that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then that third target is, who am I not reaching that I want to? And you have to have that understanding of why you're not reaching them. Are you in a different age category? Are you on the wrong platform? Are you not inside of their sphere of interest? Have you not been able to show them why they need what you're offering? Sometimes there's some of us are lucky enough to work in industries where there's a clear need for a product or service. They already know why they want it. Maybe they haven't applied that to themselves, but it's already known.
Yeah.
What's hard is when you're innovating, right, and you have new ideas, there might be a lot of people that can benefit from that. But then you deal with this thing called the diffusion of innovation.
Yes, I love that. And the early adopters, it's like, if you're not going to explain to them what diffusion of innovation is, because I could go into that all night.
So diffusion of innovation basically is a sociological curve that indicates the rate of acceptance of a new idea, a new service, a new product, a new technology. And you'll have people who are excited to try out new things. And so they're already going to jump on it. Like the Tesla Roadster, when it first came out, maybe it was only a 2-seat car, maybe it was impractical, maybe it didn't have a long charge, but people who were already enthusiastic about that technology and getting connected to it, they were willing to go ahead and buy that product. And that's when the things that gave them the momentum to be able to go on with the subsequent waves of release and improving the technology. So there will be people who are willing to try something when it's not already a tested, understood solution or an understood problem. But after that, there's a kind of a sociological lag that goes on, and you have to get past that first speed bump, which is why sometimes it can be better to translate the thing that you do into something that people are already familiar with, and then incrementally show them why your approach is different, or what it is that you have to offer that's different, because it's the people who are already looking for that known solution who might be willing to listen to the next steps of that. So in PR, that means that we have to think about the awareness of our brand, right? The awareness of our product, the awareness of the service in general, even if we're not specifically the ones offering it. If a person doesn't know what an intimacy choreographer is, then it's going to be pretty hard for them to find you, and have an idea of where that person lives. You have to, whatever these job descriptions are, whatever these services are, you have to, have an understanding of how known it is in the market. Now, there's lots of different methods that you can use for public relations. The key is understanding where it is that you need to go in order to be able to find them, to influence them, to contact them. And then you have to also decide, what's the desired change look like? We always want to go backward from the desired end result. And it's very helpful if you can find models of that success that have already been successfully implemented. That way you have an idea of concretely what success looks like. and you can go backward and you can see what steps that person went through. Maybe they were on the cover of Time magazine, or maybe they were featured in an editorial. What other things did they write? What other things did they do? What other appearances did they make? What other interviews did they do? What changed about the market before that opportunity came in for them? You have to take a look at that process of someone who has a similar problem, a similar marketing avatar, a similar need for public relations. Because if you can do that, you don't have to innovate. You don't have to come up with a brand new approach. You can use something that's established first. And I think when you're starting on the small level with a smaller business, as you're starting as an entrepreneur, you don't want to reinvent the wheel to start. You need to examine existing social trends, examine products or services that are like yours, that have caught enough attention, and see what other people have done well, but also what mistakes they've made. Sometimes if we don't do enough market research, and there are really cool examples of even really large companies that have made this mistake of not doing market research. I have to pause for a moment and talk about how important that is. Because, for example, did you know that Colgate, they actually tried to come up with a line of TV dinners?
No, I didn't know that.
They didn't sub-brand it and take the name Colgate off of it. And because they had done so well with toothpaste, immediately when people thought of their name, they thought of toothpaste, and it didn't make them want to buy anything.
Yeah, because you're like, I don't want to eat toothpaste. And that's so funny because a lot of younger people probably don't even really know what a TV dinner is.
Yeah.
But I'm 62, so I grew up in the time that, TV dinners, in the little aluminum pans. But I never realized that. But yeah, it would be like, I don't want to eat toothpaste.
Yeah, and even though their TV dinners had nothing to do with their toothpaste, it was one of those interesting things. And it was the same thing with Coca-Cola. They responded to another company's marketing and ad campaign rather than doing their own demographic analysis. Because what was different about, let's say, Pepsi versus Coke? Well, Pepsi's trying to get the brand recognition, the nostalgia, all of the other things that Coke already has. Right? And in order to get that leverage, they went on the idea of trying to do like the taste test challenge and all of that stuff to be able to get more of a foothold in the market. And maybe that could have been, depending on what the result of the market research was. And this is why you should never assume. You should always look at the numbers, because sometimes there are factors out there and you have no idea that it's going to cause, a change in reception, right? But let's say you react to another company's, marketing or ad campaign, but then you have your own unique brand identity. And for people who drink Coke, for example, there's a lot of nostalgia and memories and history and, all kinds of things that go on culturally with a drink that maybe where the taste test challenge could have been beneficial to Pepsi, it did nothing but didn't necessarily benefit Coke, because then they put all that effort into making their drink taste better, and that wasn't what was most important.
Right, because Coke, it was all about the Budweiser, not the Budweiser, but the Christmas commercials and all that stuff, all the nostalgia, like you said.
And so, you need to evaluate not just competing products or competing services, but try and find something that has the same feeling and history that you do, so you can kind of take advantage of an existing market reception, especially if you're in a new venture, right? Just like scoping out a new business location, or maybe if we're writing up a business prospectus to start a fast food restaurant or something like that, we're going to take a look at that local area. What's traffic look like? Are there existing restaurants there? But you can never clone stamp another business's identity onto yours, and that's that second point, which is find out what's the same, find out what that success looks like, but then also figure out what's different about you so that you can create some concrete public relations goals. So good PR goals are, could be brand awareness, could be a change in public perception. It could be market resistance in a particular demographic of people, could be maybe common misconceptions about your product or service or about the problem itself. Sometimes people try to address the problem in a different way. For example, we have a multi-billion-dollar, almost trillion-dollar fitness industry, but it's interesting because there's a common misapprehension that working out translates to looking more attractive or even losing weight. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily true. You get a lot more change in your body based off of what you put into it than you do from working out. Working out changes your cardiovascular health and your muscle mass and all of that, but it won't necessarily make you skinnier. If anything, it might make the needle on the scale go up. So understanding common misconceptions that are out there, whether those are reinforced by existing brands or existing ideas, you have to be willing at some point. Sometimes you have to promote awareness of something in order to see if there is a social reaction, and then if there is, modify your strategy according to that reaction. So sometimes PR can be a multi-stage process. On the simplest level, as a business owner or entrepreneur, I think the first priority often is exposure. Deciding which people it is that you want to appear in front of, where those people live on the internet, or in whatever specific social forum group, whatever disparate avatar you have, and what do they consume on a normal basis that will get you the face time with them that you need for exposure. Because until you get some exposure with your brand, you won't know what your problems are. You won't know, you won't necessarily know what that reception is like. Another goal in PR is establishing credibility, because some types of people need, social proof, or they need to understand an approach, or they need to see a real world application, or they need to see a length of and consistency of results that goes over time in order to indicate that a company or a person is trustworthy over a period of time. So understanding the unique needs of your demographics, it all starts with them. So I think that the best way to illustrate how to come up with a good PR campaign is for us to have an example, and then talk about a common challenge, or whatever, and then looking at how we would make a PR approach. Because PR as a discipline, it's very fluid, it's very dynamic, because you're having to respond to the reception challenges and conceptions of whatever disparate groups you're dealing with. And sometimes you're trying to break into new markets, and not only do you have to probe for information, but then you also have to test things and get some initial data, get some initial impressions. So if you can think of some good examples, I can give you some ideas, some good resources if you're looking for getting into PR. I would take a look at HARO. That's HARO. That's Help a Reporter Out.
Yeah, I use that.
Yeah, there'll be a bunch of journalists, and they'll tell you the kinds of people that they're looking for, what kinds of credentials you need to have in order to be able to weigh in on a topic or an idea. Another is editorials. A lot of journalistic outlets and stuff will allow you to be able to write an editorial on a topic.
Okay.
Don't focus on self-promotion when you're doing that. What you're trying to do is use your expertise, weigh in on something, give a really good, qualified, informed opinion, and then the quality of you weighing in on that thing will then attract attention to you, to your personage, to your level of expertise, and so on. It's kind of like a boulder that slowly starts to roll, and it picks up momentum. You'll also notice that there are a lot of platforms where if you end up getting published there'll be a lot of like reposting, a lot of copy journalism that goes on, where they'll say it was originally released through here, but now we're re-releasing it here, and so on and so forth. If you can find outlets that are frequently used in that way, then working in a journalistic opportunity or weighing in on an effort with one of them, knowing that story or that period piece or that editorial is probably going to be replicated and disseminated via the normal media chain, you have to take advantage of that wave. It's like surfing. You got to find that wave, find where those good waves are, and get on one, and then you'll let the momentum carry you forward.
Yeah. Jason Croft is on here. He says PR for a company that creates authority video content for coaches and consultants.
Okay, so where do coaches and consultants live? What type of business meetings or TED events or conventions are they going to?
Yeah.
Or is there a common good or a service? Do a lot of them, end up having to do most of their streaming on a particular platform? Are they going to have to stay up to date on a lot of content that comes from a particular area so that they're frequently visiting that place? Where do they look for credibility when they're
Mhm.
considering, new services? Where is all of the competition posting, and how did they get those opportunities? Talking about going backward from the result.
Mhm.
But an important key part of that is examining your existing results too. What markets have been very easy for you to penetrate, and what markets haven't? Where has the receptivity of that been very strong, and where hasn't it? If you notice that, you do some trial content, let's say you notice that 30-second to 1-minute spots are performing really well with younger entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
and maybe answering common questions or misconceptions that a person with your expertise, talking about how do you make effective authority video content? How do you using the power of video show that someone is an effective speaker, is an effective coach? Talk, because the people who are going to be most interested in um, and getting that content from you are probably going to start by trying to do it themselves
Yes.
and failing,
Mhm.
or, and this is important for copywriting or for video or for multimedia creation, they'll get into that process and then they'll realize everything that's involved
Mhm.
and realize it's going to be a lot easier to have a professional do it
Yeah,
for them.
because the time, the cost, the learning curve, and all that, and then they're like, "Oh, I might as well pay
Well,
somebody and focus on what I do well."
sometimes the process of answering the questions of how to do something the right way
Yeah.
can show that there actually needs to be an objection, because we don't know what we don't know, right? You get that
Yeah.
whole Dunning Kruger effect where people who don't have enough exposure to a topic will think, oh, okay, I can be really good at that. That's how you get those people like on X Factor and stuff who think that they're great singers. And it's only when
Yeah.
they sit in front of someone and they're like,
It's
why are
like,
you here?
yeah, just because your family and friends say. But yeah, I mean, everybody has an iPhone or whatever. Everybody has a mobile phone. Everybody has a camera all the time. So everybody thinks they're a videographer or a photographer. That doesn't mean they know how to not only make something that looks good, but something that is effective and actually connects with people.
Yeah, don't do this, do this. Don't do this, do this. Most people think this is why you shouldn't do this. By throwing out little tidbits and expertise, you can, in areas, where on platforms where people are looking for that. And then another is, you can actually use courses, but not courses specifically geared toward the product that you're selling. You could do courses that are on a discount for people who want to do it themselves and actually
Yeah.
show just how much and how involved doing it correctly is. And
Hmm.
there will be a few people who will be really happy to learn that skill on a platform like Udemy, let's say, and then be able to do it themselves. But more often than not, people will go and get introduced to that platform, do your first few introductory lessons or whatever, and then realize that there's so much that they don't know
Hmm.
that having a professional do it could be really, really effective.
Yeah.
So um, another might be uh, doing contests or promotions for for entrepreneurs who are looking to do like a personal branding video or something like that. And if you did that, well, now you've got a lead list of 500 people who are interested in having it done, for free, that might be amenable to, if you're selling a package or doing a course or something like that.
So
Um,
let me ask you something there. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I will forget, Anshar.
sure.
Um, so, like, let's say Jason wants to run a contest, but let's say Jason doesn't have very many followers, even though he does. Let's pretend he doesn't. So, how would you recommend that he runs that contest? Would you recommend that and I know everybody's different, but if somebody doesn't have much of a following, would you, in general, recommend that they do like Facebook ads or Instagram ads or
Well,
what?
why not find a charity or
Okay.
a social cause that resonates highly with people who are already in your targeted demographic, and offer to do PR promotion video or a project or whatever for, two lucky people who do donations or something like that,
Yeah.
and then get some visibility on their platform. You have an opportunity once you know who your targeted customer is, and you know where they live, and you know what their impressions are of that good or service. Then you're going to know what your priorities are. Do I
Yeah.
need visibility? Do I need market visibility? Do I need rebrand? Do I need, are there a lot of negative or positive public perceptions about what it is that I do, or about me in particular? And where do those things come from, and why? The why is always important, because 10 different people could all tell you no for 10 completely different reasons.
Mhm.
And you can only draw conclusions if all 10 of those reasons are the same, even though the answer is the same. That's where that understanding of market research comes in.
Yeah.
Um, Exposure is definitely a challenge, but if you start solving problems for people,
Mhm.
it's just like when you start to learn about real estate. You know, it's not about looking for opportunities, it's about looking for people to help. If
Yeah.
you put your focus on helping people, helping people, get out of a foreclosure, helping people do this, helping people do that, then by providing a service in the process of benefiting yourself, then it's not about you, it's about them.
Mhm.
If you, it's that same mentality when it comes to sales. So if you can think of a group of people that have a lot of difficulty, um, being able to have that video presence, or what would be a cool way to showcase what it is that what you do, and the nuts and bolts and pieces of that, and
Mhm.
with like a contest winner, or donating your time, or because it can be easy to just give away free samples of your product sometimes,
Yeah.
but without the correct social framework, without the correct methodology of promoting that awareness and showing the kind of behind the scenes look at why it is that you do what you do and why it's so great, and
Mhm.
you can lose some of that. And if you have a good organization that's doing something for charity or something, like, they're going to want to show why that thing that they're doing for a contest or whatever is so great. So looking for those opportunities where you're helping them but they're also helping you get visibility, that's an important thing. Another is celebrity, right? Because we're in an era of celebrity right now.
Mhm.
And this is where studying the history of business and stuff, and I think that gets really interesting too, because we had this giant move to consumerism as we moved from
Yeah.
like the 1860s to like the 1920s, just pre-depression era, where we had like a 12 times increase in our amount of goods and stuff, but we only had a tripling of a population. So there was this
Mm.
explosion of goods, and then we had the depression, and then after we got into the post World War II economy, we wanted to support, we had all this money to spend from being abroad with all of our
Mhm.
we had industry and all of these, World War II really pulled us out of the depression in that way, and that started the whole military industrial complex, all those social changes. So being on top of those social changes, understanding the power of things like celebrity and stuff like that, that's very, very important depending on your demographic. You shouldn't make any
Yeah.
assumptions. But
But
if
so, okay, let me ask you this. So for a typical small business, obviously a big celebrity, they couldn't afford to work with them. So I guess a micro celebrity, or how, or would you
where
go,
does that perception come from?
well, that, yeah, that, because I'm thinking money, I'm thinking how much a big celebrity might want or might charge
Let
for you
me
to
let
do
me
it.
tell you
But if
something.
you have a cause that's important to them, maybe they wouldn't be.
You
So
know,
can you give us some insight
it
on that?
sounds like you might have your own objection there, because I
Yeah.
can tell you that with like an operation with just a couple of people, I helped get former director of the CIA onto a podcast that only had a few hundred subscribers. So
Yeah.
where this idea of where a person has a certain level, like you have to stick in your lane, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
So that's where psychology comes in, because if you're looking on how to provide them an opportunity, provide them a platform to be
Mhm.
able to serve the people that they serve and make what they do better,
Yeah.
then you provide the right context for that, and there's no limit to what you can do and or who you could have talking about something. For a while I worked in the adult industry in Nevada. Think of how difficult it is to get any positive kind of media,
Yeah.
you know, but also there's an upside. Headlines sell. If you have, people working at legal brothels talking about the healthcare system, that's media worthy. What's newsworthy,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because if you can think of what the audience, because what's the journalist's job, right? Because we have these media conglomerates now. It's involved in journalism. We can talk about the death of the newspaper or
Yeah.
whatever later, right? But media is entertainment. People are going to be interested in a human interest story or an exciting topic. So how do you position that? If you want to partner up with a social cause that you believe in, but you have to think about the audience and you have to think about the existing market state for your particular good, product, or service. This is how you make decisions about the kinds of opportunities, because PR is not only a dynamic discipline, but it can be very time sensitive. Like you might have
Yeah.
a specific thing that you're doing on routine. Let's say you're sending out podcast pitches, or you're submitting editorials, or you're weighing in on topics or issues, or you're doing blog posts, or whatever it is that you're doing to promote. Each one of those disparate platforms is going to have different considerations that go along with it. So you have to start small. You have to think on the right level. But once you think about who it is that you're trying to reach and why, then you can make decisions about, well, even the decision of what would be the best, where would your dream publication be if you got to write an editorial in any magazine, newspaper, online platform? Where would you want to write an editorial, and what would it be on? I'm asking you.
Oh, probably, I don't know. I never thought about it. Probably, I don't know, entrepreneur or something like
Okay,
that.
but
I mean,
what
that's an
kinds of
obvious one.
magazines or what kinds of online forums or what kinds of editorials are entrepreneurs reading? What are they going to
Yeah.
take an interest in? And what is the current thing that
Mhm.
most people are trying to educate themselves on?
Yeah.
Maybe because of the resurgence of AI right now, right?
Mhm.
We're having a lot of conversations about AI because of the language-based AI, the AI that's out and being beta tested and is in the public eye and stuff now.
Mhm.
Being able to use that to disrupt your now,
Yeah.
whatever it is that people are going to relate to,
Mhm.
that's what you have to weigh on, because you have to take a look at where the public is looking to. Where is the spotlight currently shining? And if you can catch on to those opportunities the right way, it doesn't matter how small you are. It doesn't matter. I mean, that guy who sold Obama the ice cream cone, he was the owner of
Yeah.
a small business, right?
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity, but it's also not missing your opportunity. And this is something that's really crucial. Is you have to make sure that you have a funnel, a well thought out funnel, in
Mhm.
case your efforts pay off.
Great point.
Because if you get that Tim Ferriss podcast appearance, or you get that, that Nightline interview, or you get that, that feature in Time magazine, and
Mhm.
you haven't put the work into your funnel to grab different kinds of people and send them to different places, and you don't have a flow chart for that, if that website isn't ready to handle that kind of traffic, and for the 3 days after you appear on that episode, it's 95% unavailable to the people that are trying to visit it
Mhm.
because you weren't expecting to get swamped. If you don't have a contingency plan for that, if you don't plan for your success, then that 15 minutes of fame might come up and you might not be ready for it. And
That happens a lot. You'll
that's
see that a lot, and something will hit the news and the site dies,
yeah,
crashes.
definitely have to have the net ready if
Mhm.
you're going to start trying to catch fish. You
Yeah.
don't get so excited about going and throwing your line in the water that you don't have the net ready and you're not ready to, clip the line and do all the other stuff that you need to do, because you might get really excited that you caught a fish, but then it might be another while before you get to catch another one and you weren't ready. So
Yeah.
making sure that you have the expectation of success and what that's going to look like, that can be super important too. And being able to answer questions like, well, if I was writing editorials, where would I write them? What kind of
Yeah.
problems would I solve? What would I be weighing in on? What am I qualified to weigh in on?
Yeah.
You know, where are the people that are going to be most affected by my brand or service? Where do they live? And
Mhm.
because, and this is so funny too, because if you sit there and you try and do a 20-minute ad about everything that you do, a person might click off of it in 5 seconds. But if you have an interesting point that resonates with people on a completely unrelated topic, and
Yeah.
you only have one sentence that measures what you do, they might Google you and go to every single page on your funnel, because
Mhm.
people are much more likely to follow through their own process of exploration and understanding and ideas and why they want or don't want something and learning more about something than
Mhm.
they are to when it's pushed and presented to them. That can give you brand recognition, but it doesn't necessarily give you brand interest.
Yeah.
So this is where understanding your current state of being is. Doing that market research is so important. And market research, sometimes people think of market research and they think, oh, that costs a lot of money and it does this and it.
Yeah.
That's not what market research is at all. Market research is finding the people it is that you want to serve and getting as many of them that are as far away and far removed from you as possible, and getting their honest impressions and asking them honest questions. And there are so many platforms to be able to do that cheaply. You could do a market research budget of $50
Mm.
and get amazing insights about your website, about your product, about your service, about what people know about what they don't, about how your
Mhm.
content is performing and why. And then um, you have to be able to be receptive to that advice too. We can get very locked into our own ideas about a lot of these things, but we're not selling to ourselves.
Yeah.
We're the person who needs our product the least, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lesson to be learned there.
Mhm.
So once you can figure out what people are thinking, feeling, and where they are and all of that, and what's not happening, then you can come up with a plan to attack it. For
Yeah.
example, you might find, let's say you're doing authority video content, you might find that people are only spending 5 to 15 seconds when you're doing your market research clicking through your content, and they're
Okay.
not interested in doing something longer. Well,
Mhm.
then that means you probably need to come up with a campaign on shorts, or
Oh.
taking information, putting it into tidbits, or making something more visually engaging, or you know
Mhm.
it's being able to respond to that in whatever disparate market you're involved in. That's what decides PR opportunities. And that can also help you identify sociological phenomenon, because if you're looking at existing templates of success, people who have been successful doing something,
Mhm.
you'll see often that they've capitalized on a trend or a momentary opportunity, and that they were
Yeah.
in the right place at the right time. But they weren't just at the right place in the right time. First, they were in the right place because they were there waiting, right? But the
Yeah.
other part of it is they were ready to capitalize on that success. They had a funnel. They had, an understanding of the opportunity that might come, and they
Mhm.
didn't know which one of the 20 kites was going to get struck by lightning, but they knew that when they did get one, what the next step was. So you have
Yeah.
to ask yourself what success looks like.
Yeah, that old saying, it's one thing to have PR, it's another thing to actually be able to do something with it, when you have the exposure. Also, I don't know what you think about this, but just things about your own personality and your own life can turn into business things. And you were speaking of Haro, there's also there are a bunch of them out there now, but they were the first one. But there's one that, oh, it's God, 6 years ago, I was using and this is when they were new, out of Australia, called Source Bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they had the very first time I got an email for them, they were looking for someone to speak about web accessibility. Well, I'm a web developer, but I'm not an accessibility expert, but my father was blind. So I could put it in the context of little kids sitting on the floor with their toys everywhere, and that if he came through, we knew he was going to trip. And so, I wrote her a short thing about using those analogies, so that think about your website like the toys in the floor, what are the hurdles that you're putting up? And they loved it, and they did a whole page article about it. And then when my next book came out, Boomer Cash Out, their audience was younger, but the girl that wrote the article about the web accessibility wanted to write about Boomer Cash Out because that was written for older people who are going to be like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to sell my business. And she wanted to write an article for young people, millennials and whatever, that are just starting businesses, so they could be thinking about it from then instead of waiting until they're 60 years old. And so, there's those unexpected things. And I'm sure you probably see that a lot, don't you? Where
You should always look for the established trends and processes first, and then position yourself for opportunities, and then innovate. Because if you have an existing strategy that plays to the strengths of all the existing things in the market, and then you want to try something different, probably a worthwhile expenditure of your resources. If you're just focused on doing something different and you don't have any of the traditional methods up, that can be harmful.
Yeah.
And this is why, public relations, I say it's dynamic. Your audience is dynamic. Their concerns are dynamic. Social trends are dynamic. The rising and falling price of gold could change, something that has to be correlation. It's not always causation, but there's so many things going on that being able to take good snapshots. I mean, look how much the business world changed from 2019 to 2020.
Yeah.
What current events, what's going on socially, what's going on in government, what's going on in the world. All of these things affect all of these different kinds of trends, when new platforms and stuff come. Like right now, AI is in the middle of an explosion. We got more people signed up for AI in the first 10 days of release than we did in like the first 3 months of Instagram. So it was explosive. It is explosive. So being able to identify those trends, and being able to solve problems for people, that's primarily where PR goes. But another part of it is managing your brain as far as social perception is concerned. And that can do everything from the neuroscience of color, the different kinds of colors that we use have a big effect on initial impressions with the brain. What culture are you presenting to, right? Because cultural idioms and stuff are very, very different. Being able to relate to them, get closer to those peer groups, that's really important. And then it's also, how your message is coming across. Like, for example, I'll use this as an example with my brand. I speak a lot about personality type. Did you know that I actually don't believe that personality type exists with reference to the actual depths of personality, that I use personality type to talk about communication and the way that people form their thoughts. And, if you look at the Myers-Briggs, for example, there's a lot of scientific evidence that there's lack of correlation in certain, depths and all of that.
Yeah.
Studying psychology for a decade and a half, I can tell you that your parenting attachment style as a child has a much bigger impact on your personality and the way that you have objections and express emotions and all of that. But that doesn't necessarily feel accessible.
Right.
I could talk about the same things that I talk about with communication and understanding, talking about the zodiac if I wanted to, even though that's, a lot of that's hokum. The idea is, can you recognize the differences in other people, how their approach is, how their communication is different, how their needs are different from yours, and stop speaking through your own mouthpiece at a copy of yourself that doesn't exist in the room. That's the primary lesson. But in order to get people to take that leap, right, I have to bring it down a level. I have to talk about systems that people are familiar with. I have to connect with that. Do I believe that, INTJA defines my entire personality and every one of my reactions? And no, of course not. Of course not. But understanding that I'm an introvert, understanding that I'm in my own head a lot, understanding that I connect a lot more with logical language than with feeling language, and understanding that I like to weigh things against one another as opposed to tunnel vision on one thing, that changes the way that you communicate with me. And if that's not your default perception, you have to have that basic understanding of someone, before I start talking about, whether or not a person has an anxious avoidant attachment style and whether or not their emotional dependence or independence has a factor in the cognitive belief systems that
Yeah.
create obstructions to their buy-in when looking at, systemic involvement in things that cause them to splinter their social relationships or self-reliant. I can't talk about that stuff without people's ears melting and
Oh,
thinking,
yeah.
what are you talking about? And this is why being able to relate things on a level that people can understand is so important too. I learned that lesson of, hey, 15% of the population, they got an IQ below 85. How am I going to be able to transmit that information to them and show them that this is a skill that they need to develop? Just talking about listening, talking about recognizing that people are not all the same, that the same language that you use for one person is going to be different for another. And the best way to impart that, to get them thinking about that, is to give them, access to a system that they probably already had exposure to in community college, or when they were thinking about, trying to pick a career, or when they were in career development or whatever, because a lot of people get exposure to Myers-Briggs. It doesn't matter that, like, let's say Big Five or something like that, there's a lot more scientific correlation with something like that. It's about what's accessible to people. What will they recognize? What's the easiest way to get them to recognize that people are not, necessarily copies of themselves? And it's funny because, I'll have my friends who in my closer circle who are intellectuals, and they'll come to me and they'll be like, why are you talking about MBTI? I mean, that stuff was disproven, with this or that, or this correlation or that. And like, the whole point is to use a system that people understand, not to tell them who they are,
Right.
but to tell them that there are commonalities in the way that they communicate and commonalities in the way that other people communicate and think, and that being able to recognize those differences in style and choice and cognition, that is the first step to getting out of your own head and learning how to communicate. Is it the end all be all? Do I think that the MBTI is a flawless creation? No, it was two women. One of them had an agriculture degree, and they were reconstituting the teachings of Carl Jung, who, many of his theories are, a lot of that was armchair psychology.
Yeah.
It's you thinking and getting the conversation going, and at what level you're talking about it. That's important. That's important. Sometimes it's easier to tell someone that, their half of the relationship comes from Mars and another one comes from
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or whatever.
I can't think of two terrestrial planets that are much more different. I mean, Venus has, probably been flipped upside down from an interplanetary collision and is spinning in the wrong direction with horrible, caustic vapors at incredibly high temperatures. And Mars has almost no atmosphere because of, its dwindling magnetosphere, and has all kinds of other. If you're thinking of it from an astronomical perspective, you'd be like, why are you comparing those two things at all?
Yeah.
But the whole idea, simplistically, is they're from different planets, and you're trying to communicate to someone who's not the same as you. Be willing to recognize that they come from a different planet and start changing your approach.
Yeah.
So it's all about at what level too. And this is where people can get muddied up with that message, is if you make it too complicated, people aren't going to read it. If you make it too simple, people aren't going to think that there's anything new about it. Right. So there's a challenge there, and this is also where jumping onto things that people already need can be better than trying to introduce things that people don't know that they need.
Yeah.
If you
much easier.
If you have to show them a 60-second video of, why being having good authority with video content, and how that can heighten everything as a coach or whatever, in order to get them to be bought in on the fact that
their eyes roll up in their head and glaze over.
But if you can give them some 30-second tidbits on why it's so important, or what a common problem is, or stop doing this because it's causing this, or most common mistakes, or then you start to establish that credibility. People get the interest. I think a good model for that, I'm a fan of the video channel on YouTube called Charisma on Command. He's a younger guy, but he just basically bottles up these little tiny lessons in psychology, and it's a great example of the different ways that you can package content and make it accessible to someone in video format. So if you're looking for audio visual inspiration, I would definitely say take a look at his channel on YouTube, just because he uses all of the different kinds of visual methods of engagement, and then he also uses the shorts method to be able to start to get into that with people with but he's also reaching different people on, like, let's say TikTok versus YouTube Shorts. You can see the difference in the content there. This is where looking at the finished example of people who are doing something well, find out what works first, because it's going to be like, it's like there's a degree of your effort where 30% of the effort is going to get 80% of the results.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, the amount of extra effort that you put in is only going to marginally increase things unless you strike pay dirt. So you want to make sure that effort is directed the most efficacious way possible. And that's especially true with a discipline like public relations, because you may do some cold calling, you may deal with gatekeepers, you may, and learning how to deal with gatekeepers, learning how to get around, I want to get this video in front of Taylor Swift, but she doesn't even have a post on her, on her Twitter for the last 4 months, and that's with her fan base. So how do I, what kind of mutual weird connection do I need to get something across? And honestly, if you can learn how to develop social relationships, get people inside of peer groups, build rapport, you can get past a lot of those gatekeepers. You can do really, really cool things with PR once you understand their why and how good it feels to help someone else with the power that you've earned. A great way to practice this, if you go into like a sandwich shop or something like that, try making friends with that person behind the counter. Not because you can't afford a sandwich, right?
Oh, yeah.
But think of where you would need to be in that person's life to get a free one. Not because you asked, because they want to help you.
Okay.
That's kind of what getting around gatekeepers is like. So,
well, it's like today, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it was a technology company, and there was a technician at my office, and when they left, we really hit it off, and we're like jabberjaw. And when they left, he's like, "Here, take my cell phone number, give me yours, and if you have any problem, don't call tech support, don't call just call me, and I will come and take care of you, or text me or whatever." I'm like, yeah.
Learning to seek out those kinds of relationships, learning what you need to do, and this is hard for some people, to maintain those kinds of relationships, and being able to offer value to other people to drive their behavior that ultimately benefits you, and then you both benefit. Those are all really, really good things to learn for public relations.
They are. And it's like, and I think some people, well, and myself included, we start feeling like, oh, we feel like we're being manipulative, or, like the free sandwich thing. I mean, not just sales. And it's like, we have to get over that.
Create a social situation where you allow another person to feel good helping you, and you get to take that help while making them feel good, and then get more power to be able to make somebody else feel good. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's a stupid metaphor, but it's kind of like loving your parents. If you spend a week vacation with your dad, and something really awesome happens between the two of you and your love for him grows, does that make you love your mom any less? No, because you don't have a limited tank of that to give out. The way that you regard other people and the connection that you have with them, that's unique to that connection. It's not some limited resource that I've only got 4 cards, I got to give, one to each person. Being able to manage and leverage your social relationships not only does good things for you, but other people seeing the way that they're able to help and support you is good for them. So don't think of it as a selfish enterprise. If both of you benefit from something, that's not selfish at all.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I always live by the philosophy, if you can make somebody feel better, then it makes them more likely to want to make somebody else feel better too.
Well, and then there's another saying, people won't always remember what you tell them, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, building those connections, that can be so amazing, is find impactful ways to make people feel good with the things that you do decide to do for others. Don't just help, but help and make people feel good at the same time. And that'll help them remember that you were the person that took them to that place. And And managing social relationships, there's not a lot of classes on that,
No.
but having a social follow-up calendar, taking the time to wish someone happy birthday, you know, inviting someone to something, even if you know that they're not necessarily going to attend, uh,
Yeah.
congratulating them on their milestones, offering to help during their challenges. People remember that.
Yeah. And even though those are relatively small things to do, they're hard things to do because we get caught up in our own day-to-day life, but that's why they do mean so much to people, because it only takes a few seconds for you to say happy birthday, but the fact that you remembered it, you know, and said it. I need to be better about stuff like that. I get so caught up in my own head and, you know,
I have autism. Okay.
so you
I
know.
I literally had like 20 years of my life where I couldn't even look at a person and have a conversation with them at the same time.
Yeah.
I didn't own a cell phone until I was 30
Oh my gosh.
because I didn't have anyone I wanted to call or talk to.
Oh.
If I can follow up with my social connections and I can remember people's birthdays and I can congratulate people on their
Yeah.
milestones, I can offer my help, you can too.
Oh, I know. And that's the thing. It's making it a priority. And that's why it does mean so much to people. I'm embarrassed to say I missed my cousin's birthday yesterday. I was like, oh my God.
Surrounding yourself with people that are different versions of the kind of person that you want to be is really important for development, whether
Yeah.
that's personal development, professional development, because as pack animals, our social pressures have an immense effect on the paradigms in which we live, the thought forms that we use, the decision making process that we use, and that you can use that social pressure to help elevate you, or you can surround yourself with people that make you feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
comfort's the enemy of achievement, and that's a choice.
Yes, that's a great point. Great quote. Comfort's the enemy of achievement, right?
Mhm.
Well, Anshar, I greatly appreciate you being here, and I love how you made everything so relatable. Because, like I said, in when I wrote the description about what the show is going to be about, that most people think PR is hiring a big PR agency, spending all this money doing this, is sending out press releases. They think it's this big machine. They don't think about
Let's
themselves being part of it.
just have one unifying question. Whenever you're going to contact a news outlet or a platform, ask yourself, how can I help them by providing value for the people that are interested in them?
Yeah.
And if you focus on answering that question, you will automatically promote yourself.
Because you're making their life easier.
And that means that your effort is going to be multiplied by their desire to capitalize on the opportunity that you have afforded them.
Hmm. And they're going to be more likely to come back to you because they know that you've helped them in the past. You're reliable, you're dependable, blah, blah, blah.
And when you have an opportunity, when you get to make that connection, do your homework. Find out what that person has written about before. What if you're contacting a journalist, what's the last 3 or 4 pieces that they did? Give them start with a compliment. I read your piece on the gentrification of old social neighborhoods and how it's moving us in the wrong direction. I thought that was a really cool perspective. I love that quote by FDR. That was a really good call.
Mhm.
What inspired you to do that? You start a conversation like that, they're going to completely reframe your social interaction. You just need
Yeah,
help.
because you're talking about them, not about you.
If you can focus on highlighting and lifting up the people that you contact, they will remember. And
Mhm.
starting an interaction in that way gives you the most leverage, because you can ask questions like, hey, is there anything that you're currently promoting or talking about on your platform? I'd love to make sure I have the right opportunity to segue into that. Is there a new book that you're doing, or a new this or a new that? Because I could probably find a way to mix that into my answer. Tell me a
Mhm.
little bit more about you. I want to make sure I have the right, give me a good understanding of the people it is that you serve. I want to make sure this is good for them. The more invested that you are, the more invested they'll be.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I want you to tell everybody how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about you. I know it's your digital business card, so you tell them how to get there, and we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Sure. I just have I have a link card, a digital business card, and then another easy way to look for my videos and content is just my name, Anshar Seraphim, in quotes on YouTube. You'll see lots of my interviews and stuff that I've done. Um, and as long as you have that business card, like I do, again, highly recommend that great interview set I did with Jason on his show, Jason Croft.
Oh yeah, that's a great, and it's 3 videos on that, right? Yes,
And it was
that's
just
a
it was nice
great
because you
series.
don't get this opportunity to sit down and just talk, talk to someone for 2 hours in depth about a topic. And that's that thing, like, where I got that feedback from people about personality type. They
Mhm.
thought that was the body of what I was teaching. No, that's the 1.1.111 first
Uh-huh.
step of showing you that people are different and
Yeah.
that the same approach isn't always going to be great. That's not the depth of what I teach. The depth of
Right.
what I teach is understanding where those different communication styles and personality, combinations come from and what you should do in response. And
Mhm.
when you don't know what to do in response, the behaviors, the things that you can say, and the paradigm changes that you can use so that you can have them tell you how it is
Mhm.
that they need to be treated without knowing that they're answering that question.
Yeah. Okay, I will add in the comments, the link to Jason's show. It's Strategy in Action. I already have the link to your digital business card in the show description, but I'll also put it in the comments for people. And I've just had a great time talking with you, Anshar. Thank you so much for talking with me. You gave some great advice, and I can't wait to pull out some of the tidbits to share.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And again, if there's a particular topic that you want me to speak on, I've got so much. It's
I
just a
know.
question of what level. Do I talk
Yeah.
about the neuroscience and the psychological impressions of color? Do I
Mhm.
talk about, hegemonic and counter hegemonic influences in society and how that can change the way that your branding and your marketing comes across? Do I talk about the disparate age demographics that are in different types of social media and whether or not people actually are going to consume the editorials or TV spots, and who it is that's going to take interest and why? To making the decision, is putting something with the journals even the right way for me to promote my brand or my business? Well, you got to answer the question of the avatar first. A lot of these topics are very, very involved, and I can
Mhm.
talk about them in a simplistic way, but we have to get into really, really specific examples to
Yeah.
kind of get into the nitty gritty. Because when just talking about market research, what are the different types of market research?
Right.
What's click through impressions on your, how do I read a good demographic? Is there anything that I
Mhm.
should discount, out of information that I get from a demographic? What if I want to move into a global market versus a local market? All of these different topics could probably be their own hour or 2 hour
Oh, heck
podcast.
yeah.
So
Every one of them. Yeah.
yeah, so being able to cover the basics and to be able to
Mhm.
generate enough of an interest, I go into a much higher level on this stuff when I get to talk at length about it. I think I actually linked to one of my talks I did for a couple of hours,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and I was actually listening earlier today, the training, the PR
Mhm,
training. That was
mhm,
so interesting, and so interesting when you would ask them the questions and you got back the kind of book answer,
mhm. But
and
those were actually journalism and communication students who had just gotten out of
I
university.
know, that was so interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. Some people, even one of the founders of public relations for the longest time, he said, I can't really describe what it is that I do. I don't know how to describe what it is
Mhm.
that I do. So it's interesting to hear what that answer is like. But
Yes.
but being able to keep your finger on the pulse of the changing impressions of your good, your service, your product, your personage, what are the best places to find your targeted avatars? Yeah, how to develop a good avatar. And then what are the different kinds of things that you can do, whether that's promotion or offering
Mhm.
free services via contests or a platform, creating a platform. Like there's so many different ways that you can do effective public relations. So I could probably do a 2 hour talk just on getting past gatekeepers, and that's just
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you could. That's a huge one. So to the listeners out there, if anybody has any requests, something specific that you would like for me to have Anshar on to talk about, please reach out to me, let me know, because I can get him back on here and we can talk about anything that you want, right?
and do take advantage of looking at a lot of the new AI platforms. There's now AI out there that will create an entire PowerPoint presentation for you based
Yeah.
on like a few paragraph write-up, and it'll convert it to slides and everything. There's AI out there that can completely change the way that you look at images, and different changes in the social identity of people over time will change. Like, for example, pareidolia, where the psychological phenomena where we see like shapes and like faces in the clouds and stuff,
Yeah.
like in the rock. If you'd have done a post like that on social media like 10 years ago, you might have gotten, 10,000 interactions on it, because people are like, I see a face, I see this, I see that. You do something like that now, where people are obsessed with like video content, you might not get any interactions at all in that kind of content. So taking a look at psychological dopamine-led trends, what gets people into different mindsets. For example, ask yourself, right now they're talking about closing down TikTok, right? There's a possibility that TikTok might get closed, because influence foreign government, all of that.
Right.
Say hypothetically it happens. Which social media platform for which age demographic is going to explode and why?
Exactly. I've been thinking about that.
And
just wondering what's going to happen.
If that happens, how is content going to change on that platform, with people coming from a platform that's very heavy on video, let's say, and then going back into a purely textual? What's that going to look like, and where's the opportunity? What does that opportunity look like? Being able to ask yourself questions like that, get the data to have a good understanding of it, and then make smart choices. Then when you want to innovate, you're like, okay, if this happens, here's my contingency plan. I'm going to be the first person in line to try to do it. Then it happens, you got a plan. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you're definitely going to learn something.
Well, I've had a great time talking with you, Anshar. I'm sorry again about the snafu, the technical snafu at the beginning.
That can happen to anybody.
I know, but thank you for your patience. Thanks to everybody out there for being patient, for us being late. And I had a great time talking with you, and I'll see you next time, okay?
I can't wait. Have a fantastic evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.